Guys, today we're going to talk about the most shocking news story of the decade. IGN and hypocrisy? IGN and having a double standard? Who could have seen this coming? Who could have seen this story coming? Well, you see, there's sort of a duality of IGN, and it's very dissonant. It's fascinating to me. You see IGN promoting games that most people feel are mid, or even at times they suck. You know, there's the stereotypical IGN review of giving something a really high score when everybody else is like, did we play the same game? What are we doing? But then at the same time, they are overly critical of games that the broader community thinks look awesome. Like there was the story last, I guess it was 2 years, technically 2.5 years ago, with Black Myth Wukong, where they were straight up, dude, those things IGN did for that game were, I don't throw around the term hit piece often because I think it's overused. Those were like hit pieces, dude. They were alleging all sorts of insane stuff, character attacks and all sorts of garbage against the devs working on Black Myth Wukong to try and basically get the game canceled. Not like actually just we're ending development, but like canceled in the sort of cultural term, colloquial term, I guess. But they did stuff with that. They had pieces from IGN and Eurogamer attacking the devs on like KCD 2 because they disagreed with their political opinions from like one or two of the executive team. They tried to boycott anybody and any coverage of Hogwarts Legacy, for example, because of J.K. Rowling stuff. Like there's this desire to hold games to very, very high standards, even standards based purely on the development teams and all this, to hold them to a negative standard. And then there's other times where they play defense for other games that just don't really make sense. There was this article that we looked at previously where Simon Cardy wrote this, and it basically just says, can we stop dunking on Highguard before it's even out, please? Well, the game came out and we have continued. But basically it's a piece that is trying to argue that you need to be nicer to Concord because that's what you need to do. And if you are too mean to it, then you will not get good games in the future because no company will be able to take a risk and all of that. Let's see, maybe in 2026, it should be updated to never judge a game by its initial teaser and lack of marketing beats running up to launch. A mouthful, sure, but we'll never discover the next great game if we've endeavored to kill it before it even arrives, which is bizarre because it's like, so you want people to not judge a game based on the teaser trailers that they put out? What else are you supposed to judge a game on, dude? Like it's this bizarre feeling that these companies are entitled to your time and energy and playtime. Like they're not, okay? Even if a game is free to play, they don't just automatically earn your right to download it. If anything, being free to play means the game needs to be even better, because when a game is free to play, it's really easy to install, play a match, and then uninstall. Super easy. If you pay $50 or $60, then you're in and you might play a few matches even after you get out of it, but or even if you're disappointed with the first match or two. But being free to play, like if anything, the bar goes up with that, you know, like to actually hook people long term. So there's been articles like this written. And this one, like I said, Simon Cardy, can we stop dunking on Highguard before it's even out, please? Well, Simon made a video on a game before it's even out. Is Crimson Desert promising too much? And the piece that is associated with this is a piece that's basically the video, but written out, describing how Crimson Desert, if you look at the trailers and stuff, seems to be promising so much that they probably won't excel at much of anything. And listen, to be very clear, I think videos like this are great. Even if I think a game looks great, you absolutely should ask questions like this. This is a reasonable, rational thing to do. You should think through whether this looks too good to be true. Thank you, Blackthorn. Thank you. That is a rational, reasonable thing to do. This, I think, is good. I can't help but notice that it's a little hypocritical that you're doing this right after saying, can we stop dunking? And dunking is basically, if you read the whole article, it's looking critically at what they revealed. They released a trailer and then nothing else. And people looked at it critically and found it wanting and they didn't like it. And now you're saying, well, look at the trailers they put out and the stuff they put out and look at it critically. And I'm finding it wanting. That's your right. That's what you should do, is look at a product offering critically and evaluate it. But I can't help but notice that this seems to be a direct counter to what you just were saying. And it's bizarre because it's like, maybe it's just contrarianism. You know, they see that everybody's really hyped for Black Myth Wukong, and so they're like, okay, well, we hate it. It's really problematic for you to like that. maybe that's what it is. It's just contrarianism for the sake of clicks. Maybe it is actually just straight up cognitive dissonance. Maybe they do just have bad taste in games. I don't know, dude. I don't know. But here we are. So IGN being hypocritical about Crimson Desert, not really a shocker, but I do want to hear out what they actually have to say. So this is kind of a two-parter segment for Jacob's sake, cutting this together. So I want to actually look at what their concerns are, and I'm really optimistic that it's not going to be filled with things you could have also said about Highguard, but we'll see. Okay, here we go.
The Legend of Zelda, The Witcher, Dragon's Dogma, Monster Hunter, Street Fighter, and now GTA 5? Every time South Korean studio Pearl Abyss shows off a new slice of its upcoming open-world action-adventure Crimson Desert, I feel like I see a new line of influence. Over the 6 years since its reveal, we've seen a fantasy land akin to one Geralt would explore, puzzle shrines in the sky that could easily hover above Hyrule, and a complex combat system rooted in Capcom classics. But in the developer's latest lengthy video detailing the world of Pywell, a new surprise awaited us. The addition of 2 new playable characters to join Scottish Jon Snow-alike main protagonist,
Jon
Cliff
Snow.
Macduff.
Seeing you turn up here has given me a glimmer of hope. Strong words. What's made things so hopeless?
With whole skill sets of their own for us to now anticipate getting our heads around, I can't help but be excited, but also cautiously wary. By trying to do so much, does Crimson Desert risk achieving nothing?
Fair question we've asked a lot. Very rational to say. It's almost like you should look at things critically based on what's shown to you and not just blindly believe what the people selling you something say. Isn't that crazy? Crazy concept. You shouldn't just blindly believe whatever Pearl Abyss tells you about Crimson Desert. You shouldn't blindly believe whatever the Wildlight Entertainment says about Highguard. Like, and again, it's cringe to continue bringing up Highguard. I get it, but we're doing that specifically because we want to highlight the bizarre double standard way that they approach this game versus this game. You know, you should always question it, because at the end of the day, gaming is kind of a weird industry where, yes, they are works of art, but they are also products, and they're trying to sell you something. Okay, it's important to remember that, because you can love a game and think it looks beautiful and majestic, the story's compelling and everything, but at the end of the day, they're still selling it to you, right? So it's fair to look at it critically and evaluate it cautiously to decide if it's worth your time and money. With this, I think this is a fair question to bring up. I think that there's, a few, like, realistically, I guess, to give my prediction officially for what I think Crimson Desert will be like. I've played it. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised at how it controls, because it does not play the way that you think it will. You see the gameplay, it looks like it's going to play like a Souls-like combat style or combat system with like R1 light, R2 heavy attack, that type of thing. Maybe like some basic ultimate abilities like L2 or something like Elden Ring had. That's not how this works. It is much closer to a fighting game or a typical action game like a Devil May Cry or something, where it's about tying together combos, similar to like Phantom Blade Zero is going to be. So I think that that's going to surprise some people, that the combat plays out differently than they would expect. I'm hoping that the tutorial is lengthy enough and detailed enough that people can understand it, but that's something key to understand, okay? It won't play like other games that look like this. 2, I'm fully expecting the open world is going to feel like an MMO's open world. I expect it to be jam-packed with stuff, but probably a lot of repeated stuff. I think there's going to be a lot of variability in like questing, and the map's going to be massive, but this is, at the end of the day, a studio that has their roots in MMOs. So I'm guessing a lot of the open world activities will be about go here, mine another block of rocks to get more crafting components. Then you're going to go do this again, and then you're going to go do that again. I think it will have a lot of repetition, as many open world games do. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think realistically that's what we're looking at. In terms of performance, I think it'll run and look really good on PC. I think it's going to probably struggle on console. I don't think that's a hot take. but that's what I'm expecting, okay? I'm expecting it to be very lacking in hand-holding. I think that they're going to let you go out and figure it out. That's going to frustrate some people because they're hoping for more guidance. Other people like myself are going to eat that up because they're going to let you get lost and distracted and go crazy. So I think it's going to be really good. I do think it's going to have a lot of people bounce off of it because it's going to be different than they have in their head. They're trying to market it clearly so people understand what they're getting into, but I just think that inevitably there's going to be people who are like, I heard somebody compare it to Red Dead 2, so I was expecting there to be more cinematics. And it's like, that's not what the game is, you know? So that's kind of what I'm expecting. And if it's got a more compelling open world, I will be giddy. I will be so happy. If it's got more unique things to do in the open world, I'll be super excited. They're going to share more about that in the lead up to launch. But I think it's important to maintain a healthy level of like, don't expect the world. It's probably going to be pretty damn good because it looks pretty damn good. And when we've tried it, it's pretty damn good. But I'm not expecting it to be like 10 out of 10, you know, the next iteration and next evolution of open world gaming. I would love for it to be the case, but that is a massive bar to clear, you know? But let's hear what they have to say. Again, I think this is good to think critically about this, and it's a good question to ask, and you should do it for every game. Continuing.
I say this as someone who has had the benefit of seeing and playing Crimson Desert more than pretty much anyone outside of Pearl Abyss's walls, having visited the studio a few months back for our IGN first. Despite playing a good few hours of it and having quite a lot of fun with its dynamic systems and satisfyingly flexible action, I still left feeling like I'd only scratched the surface of what Crimson Desert has in store, and I don't mean that entirely positively. While it's good to leave a preview knowing there's plenty more to see, it's not often you conclude a studio visit still unsure of a game's big picture. If all those hours of hands-on haven't successfully communicated what the game is something off.
So you've come here to meet your end?
This is tricky because we've seen a lot of footage on it. We've seen trailers and we've been talking about it for a while. And it's like, okay, because I've heard plenty of people say this, where it's like, what is this game? What even is this game? I think it's a weird question to ask, for one, just because like it's an open world adventure game. And it has a lot of inspirations and a lot of little pieces of a bunch of other games. But that is the game. It's just a bunch of stuff in a massive world and a lot of little inspirations from a bunch of different things. It's kind of its own unique sandbox in that way. But from what I can tell, I know what Crimson Desert is. I think people are just trying to mentally put it into a box that they can understand, but it seems to be a melding of so many different boxes, it doesn't really fit into any single one. So you look at it and you're like, so is this The Witcher 3? No. Little bits of it, but no. And then there's other bits where it's like, okay, well, is it more Red Dead? Is it more Breath of the Wild? Is it more of this? It's like, it's pieces of that. Yeah. But I think it's going to be a very weird melding of all of these different things. I got you, Edgar. I can crank the audio. Don't worry. I can do that.
I'll be happy to oblige.
We now know that Crimson Desert's open world is twice the size of Skyrim's and larger than Red Dead Redemption 2's. I've put over 200 hours into Rockstar's Western masterpiece and feel like I still haven't seen everything. So it's anyone's guess how much awaits us in this world.
I was hoping things wouldn't end up like this.
Crimson Desert's Pywell is a gorgeous piece of geography too, with streets filled with life and rivers running with glistening water. That water is also systemically linked to gameplay options, conducting lightning magic to electrocute those who stand in it, and is transformed into blocks of ice when struck by freezing spells. It's all very impressive on a technical level, but leaves me wondering if this is all part of a we can put it in the game, so why shouldn't we mentality. From what I've played and from talking to the team, the ability to manipulate the elements won't necessarily have puzzles or challenges built around them to make it a system you'd legitimately find worthwhile. In Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, for example, you know that if you're taught how to make giant ice cubes, a puzzle shrine will likely follow, asking you to put that lesson into action.
Dude, I love those games so much. It's true. It's true. My understanding is that, again, they took inspiration from Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, where they want you to think, can I do that? And then have it work. So they want you to think, If I shoot an electric arrow in the water puddle that they're standing in, I wonder if it's actually gonna like, let me try. And then you do it and it works. That is something that they've built the game around. They really, really want you to be able to think about that stuff and then actually see it come to fruition. Dedicated puzzles and stuff. I hadn't heard that they aren't gonna do stuff like that. Utilizing those tools, but I think the idea is that it's mainly something you can use in combat. That's at least my understanding. But anyway.
Nintendo is a developer that has been making games like this for decades now though, whereas Pearl Abyss is a studio in its relative infancy, having only released MMORPG Black Desert Online so far. By trying to fit everything it can think a player would like to do in a fantasy open world into Crimson Desert, I fear it may be shooting straight for the moon without learning how to get into orbit first. It all loops back to this latest revelation that not only will we be playing through Cliff's story, but stepping into the shoes of 2 new protagonists along the way.
Playable characters.
RDR2 with aspects of Dragon's Dogma and Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, Intergalactic Power Radio. Thank you for the 10. I feel like I'm watching Fantasy RDR 2 with aspects of Dragon's Dogma and Breath of the Wild. Yeah. I think actually this is going to be much more Dragon's Dogma than people are expecting. I do think that's a fair comparison. I think it's going to, hopefully it'll run better, but I think it's just like a melding of all those different things. I do think it's fair to question whether these systems all play well together or if they feel pretty well isolated. Time will tell. But I think that, it's one of those games where volume is the main approach, which makes sense. It's an MMO studio. I mean, let's not forget that it's an MMO studio, and MMOs tend to be about quantity first and foremost. But based on what I've seen and what I've played, a lot of it is about trying to tie those systems together. So you think I have fire abilities. Oh, let me shoot the fire at this thing. It'll light it on fire. Oh, it worked. Oh, I have the electric thing. I can connect these things with electricity by using the water underneath it. So let me break open this so the water goes down, then I can shoot that and it electrifies all of it. Stuff like that. Kind of standard gaming puzzle stuff, but I think those are important fundamentals.
The as yet unnamed characters with their own presumably complex fighting systems look...
Will told us, I think it's Unka is the name of the big barbarian.
The as yet unnamed characters with their own presumably complex fighting systems look very fun to play as.
Yeah, so Will clarified this. They are playable characters, not protagonists. He wanted to clarify that because I used the term protagonist and he was like, nope, no, because I was going off of what IGN had said. He's like, no, it's playable characters. My understanding is that the playable characters, the additional ones, are primarily for side content. So it's for you to go and do like clearing out bandit camps or to go fight bosses and do stuff like that in the open world to shake it up and offer you a little more variability. He also said you can freely swap between them when you want to, so you can play with whichever one you want when you want to. And I'm sure that there's certain story beats tied to each of them, but primarily it's Cliff's story and it's about Cliff. One of the other things he said, just because I see you mentioning the particle effects are over the top, he did say that the particle effects on PC are a slider. So you can actually go from 100% to 0%, and you can adjust the particle effects however much you want. Turn them all the way off, turn them down to 10% of what you see on screen, whatever you want. So they did say you can customize it. I did ask him if you are able to do that on console, and he couldn't give a complete 100% answer. He said it should be on console, but he hadn't seen that menu himself, so he wasn't 100% sure. But he did think that it should be on console as well.
Don't get me wrong.
Oh, other thing he mentioned. I asked him, are you optimizing with upscalers in mind or natively? And he said, optimization is happening for native resolutions. Upscalers build on top of that, which is music to my ears. That is exactly what I was hoping to hear. Because if you are running the game and it's only hitting 15 frames, and then you try to add frame generation on top, it's a laggy, disastrous mess. It's terrible. But he said that just like, all of us know, you have to have a strong foundation natively for the game to build on top of with upscalers. So I'm glad to hear that. That was also a good thing.
I'm particularly drawn to the quick dodging, magic shifting, pistol wielding woman who appears at first glance to better fit my roguish tendencies. but it's yet another layer added on top of an already ambitious cake. And I like cake. You can probably tell from a quick look at my face that that would be the case. But when it's stacked so high that even Bruce Bogtrotter would take a pass on it, I worry it's a sign that Crimson Desert should not be trying to have it and eat it.
You wanted cake, you got cake.
Have at it, witch!
When Umbra casts absolute darkness upon this land, the corpses of those foolish witches from Tarek will pile into a mountain.
The other new playable hero is a hulking, giant axe-wielding brute with a machine gun attached to his wrist. If you've been keeping up with Crimson Desert, you'll know that this isn't your typical fantasy world, but one where dinosaurs, steam trains and mechs also roam around. It's all very exciting in isolation, and genuinely fun to play as your giant metal monsters come face to face with helpless medieval soldiers holding only a shield. The power trip is there. I just worry about the rest of the journey. Story and questing are incredibly important to me when it comes to open world games. The Witcher's twisting tales and many memorable side stories are what make The Wild Hunt an all-timer in my eyes. The cast of characters in Red Dead Redemption 2 and the way they weave seamlessly in and out of its world are what make it my favourite game ever. Crimson Desert has a lot going for it. The combat is exciting. The world is diverse and beautiful, and its systems are impressively reactive, but I can't help but feel wary. Most of the missions I've played so far at several different events have been castle sieges, often ending in admittedly impressive boss battles, but they've all been relatively thin narrative-wise, aside from an interesting detour to a mad inventor's lair where he'd built a golden mechanical dragon, as you do.
So, let's cut to the chase. You're seeking a means to destroy the Flying Fortress.
I am, yes.
It wasn't built for war, you know. That was never its purpose.
Asterion.
I've seen little of what's going to be the thrust story-wise in Crimson Desert as a whole to get me hyped in that regard, nor met any characters that I feel will get close to my heart. And I can't help but worry that there's a reason we've seen little of this world's story so far. Now, with the surprise edition of...
And I think there's probably a reason too. And I think it's because it's not the focus. The focus is gameplay. The focus is the open world. I agree side questing and narratives can be great connective tissue and great motivations to explore a world, but I also don't think you really need it. I think Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, or games like Elden Ring are great examples of big open worlds where most players were simply exploring and having an adventure for the sake of exploring and having an adventure, for the sake of seeing what's around that corner and just the pure sense of discovery. I think they can both work. I agree, I prefer narrative-driven open world games, but I've also had a great time in open world games that barely have a narrative at all. So it's not like a total, it doesn't preclude my enjoyment. But I do think it's important to go into this if you are one of those players and you're like, I hated Breath of the Wild. If you're like, I hated Tears of the Kingdom or Elden Ring, I need a good story and characters. Props, great, but I would say that you should go into this whole thing understanding that it's probably not for you.
2 extra playable protagonists to get to know on this adventure.
Does Karen have a story? Yes, it does. The vast majority of your time, though, is going to be spent climbing up a mountain face. So don't play it for the story, would be my advice.
That is less than 2. Surprise edition of 2 extra playable protagonists to get to know
playable characters
on this adventure that is less than 2 months away. I worry that Cliff and his friends may well be fun to play as stylistically, but contain little substance within them. I'd be very happy to be wrong though. I've been looking forward to Crimson Desert for a long time now, and have had a genuinely fun time whenever I've managed to get hands on with it. I just worry how all these well-constructed building blocks will, in turn, create a greater whole. Will its gameplay systems overlap in interesting ways and be built into mission design? Will authorial intent come to the fore, or will I ultimately feel like a kid being dropped into a sandbox of possibilities without direction? I am excited, just also a little afraid that by trying to be everything, it may end up achieving nothing.
Dun, dun, dun. I do think that's a fair concern. That's why, again, I think it's important to have these conversations and talk about this stuff. I think it's important. I think it's crucial. But that's why we need to have these conversations about every game, not just the ones that are coming from overseas, which for whatever reason seems to be a pattern. IGN does not like games from Asia for whatever reason. Like Stellar Blade, Crimson Desert, they're being much more critical of. And then, of course, Black Myth, Wukong out of China. They also were weird about that one. So it's just a bizarre pattern. But here we are. I think, honestly, raises good points. I think it's a good question to ask. And I think it is, I think it's important to have this conversation. Based on what I've seen and what I've played, I think it is what it appears to be. But I think the problem is that some people, it appears differently to them. I think some people, they look at Crimson Desert and are thinking in their head that it's going to be this, and this, but it's not. And that's where frustration could pop in. It's going to be a weird one to review, though. I think a lot of reviewers are going to be like, it doesn't play at all like this other game I like, and therefore it's a C-. I hope that doesn't happen, but I have a sneaking suspicion that might. But we'll see.
He took my thing.